Poor Translator caught Vampire King's enemies planning his murder in Russian. He made her queen. Alara had never imagined a life beyond the quiet streets of her village. Her days were simple, translating letters for merchants, reading old manuscripts, and walking through the soft mist that often clung to the cobblestones. Yet when a royal messenger arrived one dawn, bowing low before her in the frozen courtyard, her simple life ended in a heartbeat. "You have been summoned to the king's court," the messenger said, his voice trembling. "He requires your skill immediately." Alara's heart pounded. She had heard rumors of the vampire king, Valerian, a ruler so powerful and eternal that no mortal dared approach his castle willingly. Some said he had ruled the kingdom for centuries, his heart untouched by human emotion, his presence commanding fear and respect in equal measure. And now she was to serve him. The journey to the castle was a blur of dense forests and fog-laden valleys. Alara's cart moved slowly, drawn by strong black horses whose hooves struck the stones with the rhythm of distant drums. She stared through the carriage window at the looming silhouette of the castle atop the cliff. Its spires clawed at the sky, bathed in silver moonlight even in the early morning haze. The air grew colder as they approached, as if the world itself feared what dwelled within. When the carriage doors opened, she stepped onto the polished marble floor of the grand hall. Her eyes widened. The walls were lined with towering portraits of kings and queens long dead, their painted eyes seeming to follow her every move. Candles flickered in golden sconces, casting shadows that danced across the vast chamber. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and something deeper, something almost alive. "You are late," a deep voice rumbled. It came from the shadows, low and smooth, carrying authority that made the room seem smaller. Alara froze, barely daring to breathe. From the darkness emerged a figure taller than any man she had seen, with hair like spun night and eyes that glimmered red in the dim light. Valerian, the vampire king, regarded her silently. His presence was terrifying and magnetic all at once, a force that drew the air from her lungs. I'm sorry, Your Majesty," she stammered, bowing her head. Her tongue felt heavy, as though the words she had prepared were suddenly useless. Valerian's gaze did not waver. He studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You speak Russian?" he asked, his voice like velvet sliding over steel. "Yes, I understand it," she replied. Her voice was small, trembling, but he did not look angry. Instead, there was curiosity there, sharp and unyielding. "Good," he said finally. "We shall see if your skills are worthy of my time." Alara was led to a small chamber, filled with letters and scrolls in languages she barely recognized. Her task was simple yet dangerous: translate correspondence from foreign nobles and spies. She spent the hours hunched over parchment, careful with every word. The castle's silence pressed around her, broken only by the distant whisper of footsteps or the flutter of wings in the rafters. It was during one quiet afternoon, while translating a letter in Russian, that she noticed something unusual. The words spoke of a plan, a secret meeting to overthrow the vampire king. Alara's fingers froze over the parchment, her breath hitched. Murder, against Valerian. Her heart pounded as she realized the danger she was in. These were not idle threats. She had stumbled onto a conspiracy that could cost her life, or worse. Her mind raced. Should she tell the king, or should she remain silent, hoping her small presence would go unnoticed? Night fell, and the hallways became shadows of themselves. She could hear the soft murmur of voices behind the thick doors, plotting in hushed tones. Curiosity and fear tugged at her. Step by step, she followed the voices, hiding behind columns and statues. Her heart drummed so loudly she feared it would give her away. From the shadows she saw them, nobles she had been asked to translate for, huddled together with knives and vials, their words dripping with malice. They spoke in Russian, unaware that Alara understood every syllable. "We strike during the full moon," one whispered. The king will never see it coming. Alara's hands trembled. She was caught between the need to escape and the urge to protect him. She had only seen Valerian a few times, yet something deep in her chest urged her to warn him. A soft sound made her freeze, a whisper of movement behind her. Slowly she turned and her eyes met the king's. He had appeared as if from the shadows themselves, silent and sudden. His crimson eyes locked onto hers, piercing through the dim candlelight. There was no anger in his gaze, only awareness. Alara's blood ran cold. "You hear too much," he said, his voice carrying across the hall like a low thunderclap. I only overheard," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Valerian stepped closer. The shadows seemed to cling to him, swirling with his movement. His eyes softened slightly as he studied her, and for a moment she saw a flicker of something she had never imagined in a king of legends: curiosity, perhaps even respect. "You are brave," he said finally. "And perhaps foolish, but bravery has its value." Alara swallowed hard. I did not intend to spy, Your Majesty. I only heard." He circled her slowly, like a predator assessing his prey yet never striking. Few humans dare to listen, and fewer survive when they do. "You have survived because you are clever and careful. That is rare." Alara felt her cheeks flush. There was an unspoken weight to his words, a gravity she could not ignore. The king was not merely powerful. He was dangerous in a way that made every breath feel precious, every heartbeat significant. "I do not wish to harm you," she said, her voice steadier now, despite the fear clawing at her chest. I only wish to live." Valerian paused, standing just a foot away. He studied her as though weighing her very soul. The air between them seemed to hum, thick with tension, unspoken thoughts, and the faint pull of something forbidden. "Very well," he said at last. "You have choice. Speak of what you know, or stay silent and hope your silence is enough." Alara's mind raced. She had been trained to translate words, not to navigate kings and conspiracies. Yet the intensity in his gaze, the quiet strength of his presence, gave her courage she did not know she possessed. I know of the plan," she whispered. To kill you." For a heartbeat, Valerian's face betrayed nothing. Then slowly he nodded. His eyes softened, but the shadow of danger lingered. "You have placed yourself in peril," he said quietly. "Few survive when they cross the nobles or when they reveal secrets. Yet you came forward. That is unusual for a human." Alara swallowed, fighting the tremble in her hands. I did not want anyone to die. Not you." Valerian's gaze lingered on her, and she felt a strange warmth despite the chill of the hall. For centuries he had trusted no one, feared no threat, and yet here was a human, fragile and mortal, standing before him unflinchingly. And something inside him stirred, something he had not felt in hundreds of years. "You are clever," he murmured. "And perhaps more valuable than I expected." Alara's heart skipped a beat. She did not know what he meant, but the quiet weight in his voice told her that her life and her future were about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. Valerian turned and walked to a distant window, looking out over the kingdom bathed in the silver glow of the rising moon. He did not speak for a long time, and Alara wondered if he had forgotten she was there. Then, finally, he said, his voice softer now, almost intimate. "You will remain close to me, human. Your skills, your eyes, they have seen things most cannot. That is a dangerous gift, but it may also save you." Alara's lips parted and she swallowed hard, trying to find words that would not betray her fear. She understood only one thing clearly. Her life had been bound to the Vampire King the moment he appeared in that hall, silent, observing, and impossible to read. And as the candlelight flickered across his pale, unyielding face, she realized with a mixture of awe and terror that she was no longer a simple translator. She had become a witness, a player in a game older and darker than she could imagine. And the king was watching. The night deepened over the castle, and a heavy fog rolled in from the cliffs. Alara's mind refused to rest. The memory of Valerian's crimson eyes, so piercing and so impossibly alive, haunted her. She had spent the hours after their first encounter hunched over her work, translating letters that spoke in riddles of loyalty, fear, and betrayal. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the dangerous truth she had uncovered. Someone had tried to kill the king. By the faint light of the candle, she read another letter in Russian. The handwriting was elegant but sharp, words cut like knives. The conspirators were careful, their words hidden in layers of code, yet she understood enough to know that their plan was growing bolder. A soft knock echoed through her chamber. She jumped. "Enter," she called, trying to steady her voice. The door opened slowly, revealing Valerian. He moved like a shadow, quiet and deliberate, his cloak trailing behind him like black smoke. His eyes, glowing faintly in the candlelight, held a curiosity that made Alara's heart flutter. "You have been diligent," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that could cut stone. "But diligence alone will not protect you." Alara bowed quickly. "I only wish to help, Your Majesty. I wish to keep you safe." Valerian studied her. The faintest shadow of a smile curved his lips. "You are brave, human, and perhaps cleverer than many at my court. But courage alone is not enough. You must understand the danger you are in." "I understand," she whispered, her hands gripping the parchment. "I am willing to face it if it means stopping them." For a long moment he did not speak. Then he nodded as though a silent decision had been made. "Very well, then we shall work together. But know this, loyalty is tested by fire and trust is earned in shadows." Alara felt a shiver of anticipation. The king's words were both a warning and a promise. She would have to navigate this world carefully, but she would do it. She had no choice. The next days passed in a tense rhythm. By day, Alara translated letters and studied the correspondence of nobles. By night, she walked the hallways with Valerian, observing the castle and listening for secrets. Their partnership was quiet, almost imperceptible to the courtiers who whispered behind closed doors. Despite the danger, Alara noticed small things about the king that no one else would see. The way his gaze softened when he thought she was not looking, the faint tremor in his hand when he held certain scrolls, the quiet sighs he let slip in the moonlight. He was not merely a ruler. He was a being burdened by centuries, carrying loneliness and sorrow like a cloak. One evening, as the moon rose high over the towers, Valerian led her to the battlements. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of the sea and the distant forest. Alara's hair whipped around her face, but she did not move. "Look at the kingdom," he said quietly. "It seems peaceful from here, does it not?" Alara nodded, eyes wide. "It does, but I know it is not. I know there are those who wish to see you dead." Valerian's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "And yet you do not tremble, you do not run. That is unusual for a human." I cannot run," she said softly. "Not when I have seen what they are planning. Not when I know that if I do nothing, people could die." He regarded her in silence, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You are brave and wise. That combination is rare in one so young, one so mortal." Alara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had never imagined that a king, immortal and feared by all, would speak to her with such recognition. Yet she knew the danger was real. The conspirators were patient, clever, and ruthless. One wrong move and everything could crumble. Days later, the tension escalated. At a grand banquet, where nobles gathered in sparkling attire and whispered secrets over silver goblets, one of the conspirators made a subtle but bold move. A cup of wine, left carelessly near Valerian, carried the faintest trace of poison. Alara noticed it immediately. Her eyes narrowed and her hand brushed against the king's sleeve. "Your Majesty," she whispered, drawing his attention. The wine, Valerian's gaze followed her fingers to the goblet. Time slowed. The flickering candlelight reflected in his crimson eyes as he bent slightly, catching the cup before it could touch his lips. The courtiers gasped. Some dared to glance at the king with fear, others with suspicion. Valerian's eyes scanned the room, sharp as blades. He knew immediately who had intended the act. "Clever girl," he said quietly to Alara later as they walked away from the banquet hall. "You saved me tonight. That will not be forgotten." Alara's heart raced. I only noticed because I translate letters, Your Majesty. I watch carefully. It is my duty." "Duty?" He chuckled softly, a sound that was almost musical. No, this was more than duty. It was instinct, and instincts are rarely wrong. For the first time, Alara felt a connection with Valerian that went beyond fear and respect. She understood in a small way the weight he carried. And she felt, for the first time, a strange longing, not just to survive in his world but to belong to it. In the quiet hours after the banquet, Valerian summoned her to the library. The room smelled of old books and polished wood. Shadows flickered against the walls as he closed the door behind her. "You have proven yourself," he said, his tone calm yet commanding. "But proving yourself in one act is not enough. Trust must be earned, and trust can be lost in a single heartbeat." Alara nodded, aware of the fragile thread on which their alliance hung. "I understand. I will do my best." He stepped closer, so close that the warmth of his presence brushed against her. "You are more than you know, Alara. There is courage in you that surprises even me." Her chest tightened. She felt a strange mixture of fear and something else, something that drew her closer despite the danger. I only want to help," she whispered. "And you will," he said, his voice softer now. "But helping me is no simple task. You will face shadows that I have battled for centuries. You will see truths that may frighten you, and yet you will not turn away." Alara felt a shiver run through her. The castle itself seemed to hold its breath. She realized that she had stepped into a world larger and darker than anything she had imagined, and that Valerian was both the danger and the protector. The next morning, Valerian took her to a secret wing of the castle. Here the walls were lined with mirrors and portraits, each reflecting centuries of history. Some faces looked stern, others mournful, and some almost alive. "These halls hold the past," Valerian explained. "The lives, the mistakes, the power, and the sorrow of my lineage. Every shadow you see carries a memory, every whisper tells a story. You must learn to read them if you are to survive." Alara's eyes widened. "How can I possibly remember all of this?" "Attention and instinct," he replied, "and the willingness to see beyond what is shown. You have both qualities. That is why you are here." For hours he guided her, teaching her to notice subtleties in the court, in the letters, in the movements of the nobles. She learned to see lies in a glance, fear in a hand gesture, ambition in a soft smile. With every lesson, the threads of their trust grew stronger, yet danger never slept. One night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, Alara sensed something moving in the shadows. Figures cloaked in black slipped along the hedges, whispering in Russian. Her blood ran cold. "They are plotting again," she whispered. Valerian's eyes narrowed. "Yes, and they are bold, but we are ready for them." Alara felt the first true sense of purpose. She was no longer merely translating words. She was a sentinel, a watcher, and in a small, quiet way, a partner to the immortal king. And then the most unexpected thing happened. As they walked side by side, Valerian's hand brushed against hers. It was accidental yet deliberate. A spark seemed to pass between them, unspoken and undeniable. Alara's heart raced. The king, who had seemed untouchable, cold, and eternal, was showing her a fragment of himself. "You are more than mortal," he murmured, his voice carrying over the soft rustle of the leaves. "And yet you are human. That is what makes you remarkable." Alara swallowed hard. Words failed her. She only nodded, aware that the line between fear, admiration, and something far more dangerous was growing thinner with every passing day. The night was thick with fog, curling through the castle's towers like ghostly fingers. Alara's footsteps echoed softly in the hallways, but she did not feel alone. Valerian moved silently beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the shifting shadows. Their alliance had grown stronger, bound by necessity and mutual respect, yet the weight of danger pressed upon them like a living thing. The conspirators were bolder now. Whispers of rebellion had spread through the castle corridors, nobles casting wary glances at one another. Valerian had warned Alara, patience and observation were the keys to survival, but the night would soon demand more than cleverness. "Alara," Valerian said, his voice low, resonant in the stillness, "tonight we act. The shadows are restless and the threat has grown too close to ignore. Are you prepared?" Alara's heart tightened, but she nodded. "I am. Whatever it takes to keep you safe, I will do." He studied her for a long moment, eyes glowing faintly crimson. "You have courage more than most mortals. Do you know why that matters?" I think I do," she whispered. "Because the danger is real and you cannot face it alone." Valerian's lips curved into a rare, subtle smile. "Indeed, together we are stronger." The conspirators' meeting took place in the deepest recess of the castle, beneath the oldest tower. Alara and Valerian approached silently, shadows cloaking their movements. Through a narrow slit in the stone, Alara saw the traitorous nobles gathered, their voices low but urgent. They plotted not only murder but a full-scale coup, an attempt to seize control of the kingdom and end Valerian's reign forever. Alara's fingers clenched the edge of her cloak. She could hear every word, translating each whispered syllable in her mind. One wrong step could mean discovery, and yet she could not look away. Valerian stepped closer, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting instant, a reminder that she was not alone. "Stay close," he murmured, "and remember, fear is a weapon they cannot use against you." The first blow came suddenly. A figure lunged from the shadows, dagger aimed at Valerian. In the blink of an eye he moved, a blur of motion, impossible and silent. His hand caught the blade midair, bending it as easily as if it were paper. The conspirator fell back wide-eyed, while Valerian's gaze swept the room like a storm. "Enough," he said, his voice calm but final. "I have tolerated your deceit long enough." Alara's heart pounded. She had seen hints of his power before, glimpses in fleeting moments, but never like this. Shadows swirled around him, thickening the air and twisting reality in subtle, terrifying ways. She felt the weight of centuries in his presence, the power, the burden, the isolation. One of the nobles made a desperate move, rushing toward a hidden vial. Alara's instincts flared. "The poison!" she shouted, pointing. Valerian's hand shot out, knocking the vial to the ground. It shattered, spilling harmlessly across the stone floor. For the first time, Alara realized just how much her knowledge mattered. Her translation and vigilance had saved him, not once but multiple times. The room fell silent. The conspirators, disarmed and stunned, met the gaze of the vampire king. Valerian's presence was overwhelming, a force that made mortals quake in fear and awe. "Leave," he commanded. "Do not test my patience again." They fled, stumbling over themselves, disappearing into the shadows. Once the hallways were empty, Valerian turned to Alara. His expression was unreadable, but there was a softness in his eyes that no one else had ever seen. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Alara's cheeks flushed. I only followed my instincts." "You have proven something tonight," Valerian continued, his voice almost tender. "Not just intelligence or courage, but something more. You have seen me, Alara, truly seen me as no human ever has." Her breath caught. She did not know how to respond. To see him, truly see him, was overwhelming. He was a being of power and darkness, yet there was a loneliness, a vulnerability that he hid beneath centuries of control. "You are remarkable," he said softly, stepping closer. "And perhaps the first person in centuries who could be more than a fleeting presence in my life." Alara's heart fluttered. The words, the closeness, the intensity of his gaze, it was frightening, yet impossible to deny. She realized that she had begun to care for him, not just as a king, but as a man burdened by time and loss. The days that followed were tense. The court had not forgotten the night's events, and whispers continued in hushed tones. Yet Alara and Valerian worked together seamlessly, a silent partnership built on trust and mutual respect. She learned to read the subtle signs in the noble's behavior, the smallest tremor of a hand, the fleeting glance, the hesitation before a word. Each observation became a thread, weaving together a picture of loyalty, fear, and ambition. One evening, Valerian led her to a hidden chamber, where the walls were lined with portraits of his ancestors. The faces were stern, mournful, and some almost lifelike, their eyes seeming to follow her. "These are my lineage," he explained. "Each has faced betrayal, power, and loss. They are shadows of the past, yet their lessons are alive. You must learn from them." Alara traced her fingers along the frames, feeling the weight of centuries in her touch. "It is overwhelming," she whispered. Valerian nodded. "Yes, but understanding the past is the only way to protect the future, and the future includes you." Night fell and the castle grew quiet once more. Alara could not sleep, her mind filled with images of shadows, whispers, and the intensity of Valerian's presence. Finally, she rose and walked to the balcony, the wind tugging at her cloak. She was lost in thought when he appeared silently beside her, as if drawn by the same restless energy. "You should rest," he said softly. "You have faced more in these past days than most mortals do in a lifetime." I cannot," she admitted. "Not while the danger is still near. Not while I feel this." Valerian's gaze softened. He stepped closer, the moonlight reflecting in his eyes. "This, what?" "The pull," she whispered. "The fear, the fascination. I do not understand it, yet it is here, stronger than any fear I have felt." He did not move away. Instead, he spoke quietly, almost tenderly. "You are human, and yet you are remarkable. That is what draws you to me, and perhaps what draws me to you." Her heart pounded. The truth of his words was undeniable. She felt it too, a connection that terrified and thrilled her at once. She was mortal, fragile, and yet in this darkness, with this ancient being beside her, she felt seen, truly seen. The following days brought both quiet and danger. The conspirators were not vanquished. Their shadows lingered, their whispers still weaving through the castle halls. Yet Alara and Valerian's bond grew, each moment of shared vigilance and quiet conversation deepening trust. One afternoon, while reviewing letters, Valerian's hand brushed against hers, a fleeting touch that lingered longer than necessary. She felt a spark of warmth, a quiet acknowledgement of something neither dared to name aloud. "You are changing," he said softly, eyes fixed on her. "You are no longer merely a translator. You are a witness, a guardian, perhaps even a companion. Do you understand what that means?" Alara swallowed hard. "I think I do. It means danger, responsibility, and perhaps belonging." Valerian's gaze held hers. "Yes. And it also means choice. You may walk away, return to your simple life, or you may stand by me. And if you choose to stay, your life will never be your own again." Her chest tightened. The truth of his words weighed heavily. To stay meant risk, yet it also meant purpose. And in the quiet spaces between danger and duty, it also meant something she could not yet name. The final test came on a night heavy with wind. Figures cloaked in black moved through the gardens, slipping silently between the shadows. Alara saw them first, her eyes sharp from days of observation. "They are here," she whispered. Valerian's expression hardened. "Yes, and this will be your moment, Alara. Watch, act, and do not falter." The conspirators moved closer, unaware of the pair watching them from above. Alara's hands were steady now, her mind focused. She signaled to Valerian, who moved like shadow and storm, his presence bending the darkness to his will. The intruders faltered, their confidence shattering in the face of Valerian's power and Alara's keen observation. Within moments they fled, disappearing into the night. Valerian turned to Alara, his expression soft, almost vulnerable. "You were magnificent," he said, "and once more you have saved me." Alara's heart swelled. She had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and emerged stronger. But more than that, she had seen the king as he truly was, powerful, immortal, yet human in ways few would ever know. The castle lay quiet beneath the pale light of dawn, but the air thrummed with anticipation. Alara stood at the highest balcony, looking out at the misted valleys below. The kingdom was hers to witness now, not as a simple translator, but as someone bound to its immortal king. Her chest swelled with a mixture of pride, fear, and something deeper, an unfamiliar warmth that pulsed every time Valerian was near. He approached silently, as always, his cloak brushing the stone floor like a shadow gliding across the moonlight. His eyes, deep and crimson, held a softness that few had ever seen. He stopped beside her and looked out over the kingdom. "You have done well," he said quietly. "You have faced danger, uncovered betrayal, and stood beside me when most would have fled. You are extraordinary, Alara." Her hands trembled slightly. "I only did what I could. I could not let them win. Not after everything." He turned to her, the faintest shadow of a smile brushing his lips. "No, you did more than survive. You have become part of this world, part of me, and now the choice is yours." Alara's heart skipped. The weight of his words pressed on her. The offer was not merely a title or a place at his side. It was a life intertwined with centuries, power, and danger, but also with something she had never thought she would experience: trust, respect, and perhaps love. The coronation was set for the night of the full moon. The castle shimmered with silver and gold, banners fluttering, candles glowing in every hall. Nobles from across the kingdom had gathered, many still wary after the conspiracies that had unfolded. Yet, despite the tension, there was also a sense of awe, as if all who entered these halls felt the pull of something ancient and powerful. Alara stood beside Valerian in the grand hall, her hands lightly resting on the hilt of a ceremonial dagger, a symbol of vigilance rather than violence. She had been trained, guided, and tested, yet her presence here was as much a statement of courage as of beauty. Valerian's gaze never left her. It was steady, commanding, and yet filled with unspoken emotion. For centuries he had ruled alone, trusted no one, and kept his heart guarded. But now he allowed her presence, her insight, and her courage to stand beside him. "You have earned this," he murmured almost to himself. "And more than that, you have earned me." Alara's lips parted. She wanted to speak, to answer, but the weight of the moment silenced her. She only nodded, her pulse quickening. As the ceremony began, the kingdom's nobles watched in silence. Valerian's strength and presence filled the hall, commanding awe. He stepped forward and Alara followed, every step echoing with purpose. The ancient crown, crafted from obsidian and silver, waited upon the altar, a symbol of sovereignty and power. When Valerian placed it upon her head, it was more than a coronation. It was acknowledgement, trust, and unity. The castle itself seemed to hum in approval, shadows curling like protective hands around the new queen. Alara's eyes met Valerian's, and in that silent exchange, words were unnecessary. They had faced betrayal, conspiracies, and danger together. They had learned to trust, to rely on one another, and to see beyond fear and duty. The crown was not merely a title, it was a promise. The celebration did not last long. Outside the castle gates, a dark figure lingered, cloaked in black, observing with patient malice. The conspirators may have been defeated, but Valerian's enemies were never truly gone. The figure slipped silently through the shadows, a reminder that peace was always temporary. Valerian's senses caught the presence immediately. His eyes narrowed, crimson flaring faintly in the dim candlelight. "They never rest," he muttered, "and neither can we." Alara felt a thrill of fear, but also of purpose. She had faced the shadows before, and she would face them again. Her courage had been forged in the fires of danger, her mind sharpened by the careful observation of human nature and the whispers of conspiracies. She was no longer merely a mortal. She was Valerian's queen, his ally and his confidant. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we will face it together." Valerian's hand brushed hers, a subtle yet deliberate gesture. Together, he agreed. The following days were a delicate balance of ceremony and vigilance. Alara moved through the halls with newfound confidence, her presence respected by nobles and courtiers alike. She had learned to read gestures, notice hesitation, and understand the unspoken ambitions that whispered through the castle walls. Valerian observed her quietly, admiration evident in his gaze. He had seen countless humans, many clever, some brave, yet none had touched him as Alara had. Her courage was remarkable, yes, but it was her heart, her willingness to see him, not just the king, but the man beneath centuries of power and isolation, that moved him in ways he had not thought possible. One evening, as the full moon bathed the castle in silver, Valerian led her to the highest tower. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of the sea and distant forests. Below, the kingdom stretched in a tapestry of mist and light. "You have changed," he said quietly. "You are no longer the timid translator who arrived months ago. You are something more. You are a presence, a force, and my companion." Alara's heart raced. I only followed my heart, your majesty. And you?" Valerian's eyes softened. "And I have been changed as well. You have reminded me that even immortals can learn, can feel, can trust, and perhaps can love." The words hung in the air, delicate yet powerful. For centuries, Valerian had trusted no one. Yet here, under the silver light of the moon, he allowed himself to speak truth. Alara felt her chest tighten with emotion, a mixture of awe, fear, and longing. Their peace was interrupted one night by a sudden disturbance in the northern walls. Shadows moved like liquid, silent but purposeful. Valerian's senses flared, and he moved with terrifying speed, Alara close behind. Figures cloaked in black had returned, not just conspirators, but agents of an older threat, tied to ancient curses that Valerian had long kept at bay. The castle itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if aware that a new battle was beginning. Valerian's eyes glowed crimson. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice a low rumble. "Do not falter." Alara nodded, her mind sharp, her instincts ready. Together they moved through the shadows, a force united. The attackers were clever, but Valerian's centuries of experience and Alara's human insight proved unbeatable. Within moments, the threat was neutralized, the intruders fleeing into the night. Valerian turned to her, his expression both stern and tender. "You have proven yourself beyond measure," he said, "and not just in skill but in heart. I trust you as I have trusted no one else." Alara's chest swelled. "And I trust you, Valerian, always." The kingdom began to flourish under their united rule. Nobles who had once whispered in shadows now respected her intelligence and courage. The people of the kingdom felt the strength of their rulers, a king and queen who faced danger together, whose partnership was built on trust, courage, and mutual respect. Yet, even as peace returned, Alara knew the shadows would never fully vanish. There would always be threats, whispers, and tests of loyalty, but she was ready. She had grown, transformed by trials, by trust, and by the quiet, unspoken bond she shared with Valerian. On the night of their formal coronation, the castle gleamed like silver and gold. Shadows danced along the walls, and the moonlight painted the banners in ethereal light. Alara stood beside Valerian, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The ceremony was more than a formality. It was a declaration of unity, power, and enduring trust. Valerian's eyes met hers, crimson softening into warmth. "This is not merely a crown," he whispered. "It is a promise that whatever comes, we face it together." Alara smiled, her heart steady. "Together," she agreed. As the crown was placed upon her head, the castle seemed to exhale, shadows curling protectively around them. The people cheered, yet all around, a quiet awareness lingered. The kingdom was safe for now. But true peace was forged not in absence of danger, but in courage, trust, and unity. And in that moment, Alara understood. She was no longer a simple translator. She was queen, protector, and companion to the immortal king. She had faced fear, survived betrayal, and embraced a destiny she had never imagined. And as she looked at Valerian, she realized something else. Even immortals could change, could feel, and could love. The castle stood silent under the moonlight, a testament to power, courage, and the bond between mortal and immortal. And in the heart of its shadows, a new era began, a reign not of fear, but of trust, strength, and shared destiny.